With both The Division 2 and Anthem releasing within a month of each other and being similar types of games, the reception to each launch has been anything but similar. With a tidal wave of negative or average reviews and even more discussion surrounding its issues, Anthem has had one of the most controversial launches of a game in recent memory, and perhaps since the first Destiny. Their first outing into the looter shooters, Bioware have spent much of the time since their game's launch trying to fix technical issues or problems associated with the game's loot system. In stark contrast to Anthem, we have The Division 2, which has surprisingly launched with not only few technical issues, whether server or performance related, but it's been very well received so far within the gaming community. With few players having reached the endgame already, the path to max level alone makes the game a success. So where has The Division 2 succeeded, and what has Anthem struggled with? Both offer great shooting mechanics, a large open world to explore, and loot to earn. But where Anthem has let down so many gamers are in the parts that are so important to the success of looter shooters. They form the basis of the repetitive grind. Ubisoft has taken all of the experience they've acquired from making the first Division game and applied most of that to the sequel of The Division 2. But instead of trying to reinvent what has come before, they have built on top of it. Now, some may feel that The Division 2 is really The Division 1.5, and they wouldn't be incorrect in thinking that, but what Ubisoft has done is what I wanted from their sequel, a more refined version, and to take much of what the first game ended up with and have it included on day one for The Division 2. I'm still playing through the campaign and aren't at max level yet, and I haven't delved into the Dark Zone or any PvP content so far, but since Anthem has no PvP component, this is strictly a PvE analysis on the success of both games. One area where I feel The Division 2 succeeds from something that is so simple is that of the main campaign. Not being sci-fi like Anthem or Destiny 2, The Division 2 is about finding a cure to the green poison outbreak and basically take back Washington DC from the several factions that are trying to seize control. Its simplicity allows the focus to be on the complexity of the systems of the game. The Division 2 is much more of a classic RPG than Anthem, and one large reason for that is simply from having a stats page and being able to drill down into the most intricate of stats related to your character, weapons, and items. This is where I feel The Division embraces complexity over Anthem, and even Destiny, where they can feel light on the RPG side of things, which is by design. The Division 2 throws a lot of information about the game at you, about your character, the stats, the settlements, your base of operations, and more. And although it can feel overwhelming, most hardcore fans of these looter shooters want this. Ubisoft should be commended for giving players more complexity than trying to make it more accessible. And that's the key to how successful these games will be. We can see with the negative sentiment that surrounds the Anthem launch that gamers expected more on day one, and if we branch out from only looter shooters, gamers want more content and the games to have minimal issues. Gamers have grown tired of needing to wait 6 to 12 months for issues to be rectified when they should have been known about and fixed during development in these types of games. Hopefully The Division 2 is the start of not only having minimal technical issues at launch, but also having a looter shooter which feels somewhat complete on release with a depth of content that is expected. Having not hit the end game yet, the game is already worth it just to experience the main campaign and side missions. And that goes for whether you are a more hardcore player who plays many hours a day, or whether you are only investing a few hours a week. This is in contrast to Anthem. For those wanting a much more in-depth look at the game though to max level, be sure to check out my review down below. But Anthem has proven itself to be different to The Division 2. Ubisoft learned from its past mistakes, whilst Bioware, even though they are very new to this style of game, seem to replicate many of the mistakes of the first Division and each Destiny game. Anthem feels unfinished, and I don't mean because of its technical problems, which are an issue of course, but as I said in my review, it seems as if Bioware forgot to fill this amazing world with the necessary content to keep players invested. To be honest and somewhat brutal, the best decision Bioware and EA made was to launch ahead of the Division 2, as if it hadn't, the question surrounding why Anthem took so long to make but offers so little in the way of content and things to do would see gamers be even more critical. Anthem takes these fantastic flight and gunplay mechanics but fails to utilise them within enough content to warrant players logging in each day, and the success of a good loot shooter is precisely that, to log in every day because it's fun to play and because it offers activities to do and rewards to earn. Now, the Division 2 is still within its first week of release, but it's already clear that Ubisoft has thrown a hell of a lot into this game, whether it's for those players wanting to play through the story, or for those who want to grind the end game repeatedly and lose themselves in the gear and stats. The abundance of this gear and its individual stats and how that relates to your character build is a large part of why looter shooters or a game such as Diablo become so popular. It's offering different play styles in how to tackle all of its content, and at each higher difficulty level, earning better gear to then tackle higher difficulty content. And the cycle continues. And this is where Anthem has fallen down quite considerably over the last week especially, and why Bioware has so much work to do when it comes to delivering a game that can compete within the genre. Whilst Anthem is struggling to get the balance of its loot drops right, it is also struggling with how the loot actually affects your character. Linked down below is an article which goes through the maths of how it works, or more specifically, how the loot isn't working. And this shows the general theme to what Anthem has been since its release. Often tweaks are rolled out for these games after the release, but Anthem is having more problems pop up as time goes on. The more time Bioware needs to spend on getting some things right, things which should have been ironed out during development, it takes time away from focusing on adding the much needed content which players are screaming for. And this is what Ubisoft needed to get right from day one. Take everything learned from the first Division game, look to the competition to see what problems they've had since the first game's release, then take that knowledge and implement it during development to make sure you release the strongest possible product on day one, which kickstarts the positive word of mouth. I'll touch on a few things which makes The Division 2 a worthy sequel before we get to the main reason why it seems to be a winner. Ubisoft has refined the gunplay in this sequel, and shooting the various weapons feels fantastic, but Anthem also has great gunplay, even though it's in desperate need of many more different weapons within each weapon category. The open worlds of each game are stunning and vastly different to each other, but whereas Anthem is plagued by frequent and long load times, The Division 2 rarely has them at all, apart from booting up the game when you die or fast travelling between locations. But then there is the endgame, the reason why many players continue playing these sorts of games, and why it's such an integral part of having a successful looter shooter. Anthem's endgame is virtually non-existent, and what little there is of it is constantly being tweaked by Bioware in the hope of sorting out its issues without losing a large chunk of the player base in the process. But with important endgame content in the form of Cataclysms not being released until May, EA and Bioware would have known that Anthem's endgame was quite literally just that, the end of the game, as there is so little to it. The Division 2, on the other hand, evolves and changes once players hit that endgame and introduces additions to it which players have not experienced during the rise to max level already. Anthem basically uses recycled content from the main campaign as its endgame, and offers little in the way of loot which rewards the player enough or is different enough from what they already have to warrant to continue playing the game. Apart from daily and weekly activities, the game really doesn't have enough for players to keep playing and to keep logging in every day. The Division 2 throws a new faction into its endgame called the Black Tusk, and players can take on invaded versions of missions, which then go towards opening up the various strongholds around the map. Apart from completing these missions, players will also need a gear score high enough to unlock the stronghold as they progress through each of the 5 world tiers. This is the loot, this is the grind of The Division 2, but apart from having more content than Anthem, there is more meaningful customization in the form of weapon mods and crafting to further character loadouts and builds. Plus, there are the 3 specialised weapons to earn and the skill trees, and this is on top of the regular content of missions, side missions, and upgrading the base of operations and the settlements. As I said in my review, Anthem is a fun game to play, but since the Division 2's release, it has exposed Anthem's issues in regards to its lack of content, minimal meaningful loot, and the endgame that is almost non-existent. Ubisoft didn't reinvent the Division franchise, and it isn't some revolutionary piece of software. Just like its main campaign, it's simple in its execution, but it's deep in its systems and mechanics. These looter shooters evolve over time, but that does not mean a lackluster game is expected upon release. With Anthem's struggles and the uncertainty around what the future of Destiny 2 holds, the Division 2 may be a game that delivers upon its release and throughout its life. Ubisoft just need to remember that quality content is king, respecting the player's time and rewarding them with gear and items they desire. When these are fulfilled, then let the grind begin.